like to call the meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge, please. Resolved that the Board of Education assign Mr. Joseph DeBarber as the clerk pro temp of the district for the regular Board of Education meeting June 6, 2022. Can I have a motion, please?
Move. Second.
Shelley first and Brian second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 7-0.
Are we supposed to assign Joe as clerk formally?
Yeah, we just did. You're all set, Joe? Got it? Okay. And you're all set with roll call?
Yep.
Resolved that the Board of Education approve the agenda for the June 6, 2022 regular Board of Education meeting. Can I have a motion, please? Jeff first. Matt second. All in favor? Opposed? Passes 7-0. Prior to the meeting tonight, we had a reception for our retirees. On behalf of the Board of Education, I'd like to thank everyone who is retiring for being so dedicated to the students and school community over their years in Baldwinsville. Your love of children and hard work to help them feel safe and grow to reach success is truly appreciated. As you move on from this chapter, I know you will take very many fond memories with you. The number of lives you have touched are too many to count, but I'm sure many memories and lessons will live on to the students and colleagues you've worked with. We owe you a debt of gratitude for all that you have done. I'm not sure if any of my colleagues have anything else they'd like to add, but I definitely want everyone to stand up and give them a round of applause for all the years they dedicated to Baldwinsville and our children.
I would just like to thank all of the retirees that are here today and then couldn't be with us tonight. Some of them are very near and dear to my family, and so many of you, other of you have touched so many different children's and families' lives. Thank you for your dedication and your service to the district and to the kids.
Okay, moving on to the next part of the agenda, we have correspondence, board activities, and committee reports. Oh, you guys don't want to stay? It's been a fantastic night. I was wondering why you all stood in the back. No. Okay, on May 25th, there's a CNY SBA annual dinner meeting. Does anyone want to report out on that, who attended?
Yeah, I thought it was good this year. The keynote speaker was Representative Mannion. Is that right? Yeah, so he gave a great perspective. I guess I didn't know he was a teacher before so I don't follow politics too much, but he gave a good view of his ties, so it made me feel better that we have somebody who's in touch with state ed and representing us. So that was a highlight for me. That and Joan getting elected vice president of CNY. So she won't be bored after she leaves us. It's good to know.
Thanks, Jeff. And then on June 1st, there's a public hearing regarding the foundation aid increase. It was a Zoom meeting. Does anyone have anything to say about that? Okay. Upcoming events. On June 8th, we have a Van Buren building visit on Wednesday, and there's also a joint PTA officers meeting that evening. On Monday, June 13th, we have a special board meeting for superintendent's evaluation, and then we will also go into a board retreat following that. On Monday, June 20th, is the Juneteenth holidays. There's no school for students, and the district office is closed. On Friday, June 24th, we will have graduation at the Pelcher Arcaro Stadium with a rain date on the 25th. And then on Monday, June 27th, we have a health insurance committee meeting preceding the next regular Board of Education meeting. Does anyone have any other reports on any events they've attended across the district or any professional development they've attended since the last meeting?
I was able to attend last week, I think it was Tuesday, it might have been Wednesday, the sixth grade, Ray's sixth grade band concert at Baker. And once again, it was great to be in person and see the kids perform, and it was just really nice. And actually they're doing every hour, they're doing like orchestra, chorus, and then band. Previous years you would have to go and sit through all of them. Not that it's not nice to see everybody, but I think the smoothness of it was nice, and it's just good to see everybody back in person.
Since Kaylee's not here, wrote in the, I attended the, what is it called, the International Culture Fair, and that was really well done. I think we had all but Antarctica represented there, so good turnout, and for the students and adults that participated, it was a great event.
Jeff, is that during the day or is that in the evening?
No, I attended around 7 o'clock. I don't know exactly what the hours were, but it was an evening thing. I think during the day they had the career fair in the high school that same day, so I'm not sure if they do a daytime version of it, but it was in the library this year, so it was nice.
What else happened? Next up, be the student board report, and Kaylee Evans can be with us tonight, so Brian's gonna read her report out.
I'm gonna try to do it as well as Kaylee has done it since the beginning of the year. As we begin the last full week of the school year for Durkee and Baker students, end of year plans and events have begun. Last Thursday, Riley Priest and Cesar Perez Marino hosted the annual Culture Fest. On Friday, yearbooks were distributed to Baker students. Thank you to the students and advisors that put together this year's amazing yearbook. Later that day, seniors attended the mock DWI event where we learned about the dangers in driving while intoxicated and saw the aftermath of a drunk driving accident. During the past week, we also had guest speaker Dr. Brooks Gibbs come to Baker to give a presentation on how to stop bullying. A big night for the class of 2022 is Tuesday, June 7th, Moving Up Day, where students who earn scholarships through Dollars for Scholars and other community scholarships will be awarded their scholarships and meet the scholarship donor. This Saturday is the senior ball at the On Center, followed by Keep the Ball Rolling. This is an event students have been looking forward to all year long, and seniors are super excited to attend. Excuse me. The following Tuesday, June 14th, is the last day of classes for Baker and Derby students. The senior walk, senior picnic, and graduation rehearsal will take place on June 21st, and that Friday, June 24th, is graduation. Our sports teams and bands have been very busy over the past 2 weeks. The tennis, track and field, lacrosse, and softball teams were all busy with competitions and regional and state championships last weekend. On May 28th, the Baldwinsville Marching Band competed at the Darien Lake Music Festival and were awarded first place with a perfect score. That Monday, the band marched in 2 Memorial Day parades. Band director Casey Vanderstoel tweeted, "Awesome weekend competing at Darien Lake, as well as performing in the Baldwinsville and Jordan Elbridge Memorial Day parades." Super proud of our students and instructors for their commitment to our program and for honoring the countless sacrifices of our military. Last Saturday, the Pep Band performed in Clinton Square at the Taste of Syracuse, and on June 28th, the Pep Band will perform at Paper Mill Island. Tomorrow, June 7th, the Baldwinsville Marching Band will march in the Cortland Dairy Parade, with many more parades to come between now and our final parade, the 4th of July Parade in Pennsylvania. As we wrap up the 2021-2022 school year, many students, including myself, are feeling a mix of emotions. The past 2.5 years have been a roller coaster for many, and students are very grateful to be able to attend events like these ones again. Events the class of 2020 and class of 2021 didn't get to experience. We look to these next few weeks with optimism and pride in ourselves, our peers, our teachers and staff, and everyone who's been on this journey with us.
Thank you, Brian. I see you were a close second to Keely. Nice job.
I'll take it.
Joe, do we have any requests to speak tonight?
No requests.
Okay. Moving on to item 8, the consent agenda. Resolved that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda pursuant to the attached. Can I have a motion, please? Shelley first, Jeff second. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Opposed?
I'm going to abstain from the vote with a non-instructional appointments in there for reasons that we talked about in the executive session a couple weeks ago. I don't feel like I've got enough information to make a final, right?
You're
Abstain.
from the whole consent agenda, not just the, okay.
Well, if I can do it for a particular piece, I'll do that, but I'm not sure how that goes with it. Doesn't matter, it's already passed, so.
So passes 6, 0, and 1. So Frank is abstaining. Okay, moving on to item 9, reports. So I'll have Superintendent Thompson take this section of the agenda.
Yes, we'd like to discuss the summer curriculum and professional development plan, updates and offerings. Have the team come forward, please. Thank you.
I'm up first, so thank you for having us tell you about the, which we think is an exciting summer of professional development. On both of those documents, when you click on them, you don't get to do it now. It goes into more detail about the elementary and secondary offerings. But on the next page, I'll talk about that too. So on the elementary one, you'll see one called Planted Not Buried. And that's a 3-day series workshop that the learning coaches have put together for K-3 and 4-6. And really, all of these talk about starting the year with intentionality. So having gone through what staff has gone through this year, doing the reentry, we'll say, to school, and some of the challenges, the coaches have taken that feedback and developed a 3-day series of learning for them. Where they can get together, collaborate about the start of school, and really starting off with intentionality, starting the year off right. It also talks about in there, how do we bring together SEL, culturally responsive teaching and learning, and restorative practices. How do we put that into our teaching so it's not 3 different separate buckets? So that's along with best teacher practices. So that's what that piece is about. The go slow to go fast, which is offered to K-3 and 4-6, that's on the workshop model of elementary instruction. And whether you're talking reading workshop, writing workshop, or a math workshop, what does that structure look like, so they'll be able to work with teachers on that. Curriculum work, per se, is really going to be around ELA, math, and social study content areas. So those curriculum representatives will get together for 2 days on each, working with myself and the learning coaches on their units, doing some revisions, which we look at them every year for any tweaks that need to be done, and getting that all set. The book adoption review, for K-6, they're in different stages of recommending different books. You'll see that next year for their ELA and social studies units. 6th grade already brought a couple up this year. Now I'm working with the rest of them to see what we need to do to update their mentor texts. I talked about the restorative practices and culture responsive teaching and learning. So both of those as a district, those are some focus areas for us. So this summer, there's 2 days of professional development with teams from every building, K through 12, so along with the administrator. So they're going to spend 2 days on restorative practices, but we've contracted with BOCES to come in and do some professional development on that, and then they're going to be with us for a year. So part of that is BOCES will then also meet with the teams at the building level to say, help them build their plan for what that looks like in their building. So part of those 2 days runs into an additional half day where they're going to be working on, how do we roll this out at Derby, at Eldon, at Palmer. Every building has their own needs. Dr. Holly's restorative practices, this is our second year. We're going to do this deep dive, she calls it Jump Start. So I believe it's the last Wednesday of school. For 3 hours, teachers will come together. For one of the coaches from Dr. Holly will come out. We've worked with her virtually, but now she'll be in person. What does this look like in the classroom? Really getting into the nitty-gritty. From there, we've also contracted with 4 of our schools for this coming school year, for the following school year, where she'll come in and actually coach with teachers on restorative practices. So we have cohorts of up to 10 teachers in a building. We'll go through that experience, but then we'll take that with our coaches and how do we bring that into the rest of the building. And then the other 4 buildings will experience that the following year. So that's an elementary overview as well as part of the secondary overview.
So for my update, just a couple of bulleted points there for curriculum. Those are the major things that are happening. 2022 or 23-24, sorry. World languages will be making the switch, so we've been working hard on that. We have Dr. Joanne O'Toole coming in to work with our staff for a couple of days at the end of June. ELA and math, grades 7 and 8, of course, have to be aligned to the new standards starting in September. Science, grade 7, need to be aligned to the new standards as of September. Social studies, we were all excited about the U.S. history exam. Of course, as you all know, that was canceled, so we have another year to help prepare for that. And in math, we have a new course for data science, and we have 2 of our staff members attending training. There's 2 days this week with Joe Bowler from Stanford University that our teachers will be attending remotely, as well as 2 more days in October. And I'm remiss in not having on my list here, but also our Fine Arts Department for music. We will have a couple of new classes that we are going to be preparing for in technical theater and the performing arts. So those are just some of the highlights of some new things that are happening. For professional development, the first 3 bullets really are just themes that are being woven into our professional development. You had access to the list in this of what's being offered for secondary. So I'm not going to go through all of those, but if you had any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer those. One of an addition that was late and did not make it into the summer PD flyer was civics and media literacy. That's going to be a workshop that will be really specific to helping our teachers look at their current research units so that they can tweak them a little bit, possibly to help our students pursue the Seal of Civic Readiness, which we were approved for on May 27th. So we're going to get that up and running in September. So that's my update for secondary.
Okay, sorry. So with regards to special education, we are continuing our support in PD through a local expert. We have Dr. Julie Costin, who has been a longtime professor at Syracuse University and a national expert in the area of inclusive education. She has gone on to form her own business called inclusiveschooling.com. She provided a lot of professional development for our staff last summer, and during the school year, we did a training with her through IEP and writing for our special ed teachers. And Carrie and I met with her again this year to design something very specific for PD this summer for just Baldwinsville. So through that, consultation with her, we've we're really excited that we've been able to set up some very specific PD. First off is going to be the inclusive education for all, we're calling it. It's going to be two-hour trainings with Dr. Costin, and it's for all teachers that has any student with any unique learners in their classrooms, and that they're going to really focus in on a common understanding for their roles in supporting all students, including students with IEPs and different forms of co-teaching that they can take on to support students in those classrooms, how to maximize co-planning, and really kind of be there as a support of answering questions, concerns, and comments from our staff and how we can better support and implement our practices in inclusive education here at Baldwinsville. And then, on top of that, we're going to do another session. It's going to be geared special for our secondary teachers, so grade 7, well, really 6 through 12. And what this focuses on is how do general ed teachers, how can they better support students with IEPs in their classrooms? So, you know, we do great work with co-teaching in our ELA, math, history classes at secondary levels. But that's, you know, some kids might just get a co-taught English class, and that's it. And they might be in a regular math, science, social studies class. So how, and electives. So how, when you have students with IEPs in your classroom, how can you better kind of understand the IEP and support the students in those classrooms? Maybe the student has a paraprofessional, maybe there's a program teaching assistant in there. How can you maximize that support? That's going to be the focus for that session. In addition to that, we are, again, buying a district license for the Summer Leadership Institute in Inclusive Education 2022. And this is something we've also sent teams each year to. It's a 3-day live session, seminar, and it's been offered virtually the past couple of years, but it's an amazing event where we select specific leaders, teacher leaders in our district to go to, and it's filled with international leaders and advocates in the area of inclusive education, and staff always come away inspired and with tons of strategies and ideas and resources to help support students from. For our teaching assistants, we are going to continue, we're going to do the same thing we did last summer. Part A is, so last summer we had a virtual asynchronous PD, again offered through Dr. Julie Costin, where teaching assistants would on their own time get paid for their hours to watch videos and then really kind of dive deep into that material, again all towards how can you best support students as a teaching assistant, as a paraprofessional in school. And so that was very well received by the teaching assistants that did attend it last summer, but not all were able to do that. So the ones that weren't able to do it last summer, we're giving that option for them again this year to get paid for that time. And for the teaching assistants that did do it last summer, we now have a bonus master class for them this summer. It's going to be 4 or more asynchronous videos that they can watch. They're in the areas of dealing with challenging behaviors, kind of going up a ladder of helping kids get more independent, 100 ways to adapt to anything, and providing supports on the fly. So things that teaching assistants can really benefit from using, because that's the work they're doing all the time. And so that's going to be the second option for teaching assistants this summer. And lastly, we're going to continue what we've always done, is providing professional development hours for our teams to get together at the end of the summer, getting close to the school year starting, for them to get to look at the students that they're going to be in their classes, on their caseloads, reviewing the IEPs, really kind of as a team figuring out and understanding their roles and what they're going to need to do to implement for those students in their IEPs. But also, this will be a really great time for them to take some of those strategies that they learned from the sessions that we offered early in the summer to kind of integrate some of that pre-planning into what they would do to start the year off to support their students.
My turn. So also, as some just supplemental programs that we're talking about, professional development, curriculum pieces to kind of fill in the gaps. Mental health first aid is something that we have offered. We just started last year. We had sent 2 staff, Meredith Rakes and Jenna Walken, to be turnkey trainers. And we've gotten really positive feedback on that training. They're both very dynamic presenters. They understand the material. They're able to use some of their own experiences, I think, to do those presentations for staff. And really the focus is on responding to signs of mental illness, mental health issues, substance abuse disorders, any risk factors. Is really kind of described as being a first responder for something related to a mental health crisis. And we are finding on our mental wellness committee that some of the representative staff included are saying that with some of these SEL signature practices and the focus on building relationships and connections, that kids are coming to them in ways they never have before and presenting crisis situations that they feel they need to be prepared for. So we will be offering that again, both to staff and to parents and community. We had done one event for parents in the fall, and so we'll be doing another community parent outreach as well this summer. You know, and again, that effort to partner with parents and just sort of bridge that gap between school and community. And so that program is specific to students ages 13 to 18. So in addition to that, we have talked for a few years now. We used to use Crisis Prevention Institute, Nonviolent Crisis Intervention for students who were struggling, maybe were aggressive. Otherwise, sometimes you'll hear it called restraint training. It's really not, that's not what it's called. It sometimes gets a bad name that way, but really the point or the goal of that training is to provide nonverbal de-escalation or crisis intervention strategies in an effort to prevent those behaviors so that you do not have to go to that route, right? So that would be a very last resort. And we had just 2 trainers in the district, and what we were finding is it was just getting more and more difficult to find the time to do the trainings, to pull staff to do the trainings. Sometimes you have a student in crisis who really needs that crisis team support there in the building, and the people are being pulled for a few days at a time to have the training or to follow up with the training, and now they're out of the building and the situation's escalating in the meantime. So we had met with some staff through BOCES, and they use something called therapeutic crisis intervention in schools. And it's a program that's very similar, but it's much more specific to staff and schools and students. And so we did make the decision to send a social worker from each elementary building, plus our SEL coach who sort of specializes in some of those tier 3 supports as well, so that we have a trainer in every building. So that we have a crisis team there, and then one of the biggest pieces is they're there in the building to help problem solve specific situations that might come up for students working maybe with a teaching assistant or staff. So you would get the benefit of the full training, but also essentially having a consultant in your building. So what we'll be doing this summer is taking a little bit of time, now that they've had the full day training, to talk about specifics relating to how do we roll out training before kids get here, that first week of school or second week of school, find some time to get crisis teams trained, and then what's the plan as far as follow-up, because there is a little bit of a consistency piece that's essential there. So we'll be doing that this summer with the social workers. In addition to that, you know that we've used the Second Step program at K-6, where we prioritize lessons after we sort of did a crosswalk with grade level standards that were already kind of hitting some of those pieces. We looked at positivity projects and things we already do, and we prioritized 3 lessons at each grade level. We also use McMahon Ryan to do some of the personal safety and bullying pieces. So what we've done over the past 2 summers now, because K-6 is a little further ahead, is we continue to create Google Classrooms and slides to, teachers are really saying, we want to embed this in our practice. We want to do our positivity practice, our positivity project lessons, but we also want to expand on some of these really scripted lessons in here. If I find that, you know, you've come in and done a lesson on identifying feelings, and I have some students that are maybe struggling, that how do I revisit that later on to sort of help them generalize those skills to everyday practice. So we have some representatives that are going to come from each grade level and work with the SEL coach to continue to work on those lessons. And that's K-6. And then 6-7, also because our middle school is kind of interesting, and then it has the sort of the elementary grade level and then a secondary grade level, bridging that gap. We had sort of tried to expand to 7th grade. Again, it's a little different because there the standards, some of those standards are hit by the health and the PE teachers. So we're gonna have some of the health teachers come with some grade level representatives and work with the 6th grade team that's a year ahead and see where are we? Are there gaps related to COVID that maybe we need to revisit and maybe prioritize some lessons in those standards going forward? So that's a little bit of work we want to do this summer at our middle school. We did find a pretty specific need, and that came out of their leadership team and the BIMAS data that Ms. Morgan and her team was looking at. So they'll be doing something specific related to that this summer. And then in addition, the last thing that we'll be doing, in addition to the practices that will be embedded at SEL's practices at the secondary level, because I think we're still building the foundation and the mindset there before we can start talking specific curriculum pieces. But the school counseling plan program committee will meet, and so we have representatives, social workers, psychologists, counselors. What we'll do is we'll look at that. We have a 41-page document. We update it every year. We'll do the program analysis as a team. We'll kind of see what pieces can now work on going forward, create a goal, and then we typically present that to you in the fall. Do you have any questions for?
Yeah, the last slide there was, we have the annual MERT training going on, and the new Clear Touch board that RJ has put throughout the district, there'll be training for that. Questions?
I have a couple of questions. Thank you for all for presenting. Renee, when you spoke, or you touched briefly on world languages, you said something about switching.
Yep.
I don't know what that means.
So we have new standards that are coming in 23-24 for world languages. So for the last year or two, we've been made aware, and so we've been working towards making some changes in our programming with materials, instructional, strategies, and things like that. The biggest change is that we're going to be moving towards a level of proficiency at each level versus my student knows this set of vocabulary words for level 1, level 2, level 3. It's moving away from a more grammar-based instructional model to one where we're really promoting students' ability to speak the language.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One question for Carrie. So I just want to make sure I understood it right. You indicated there's SEL coaches. Are there multiple SEL coaches, and are they in specific buildings?
No, there's the 4 learning coaches, and then we have an SEL, Jenna Wolken is specifically designated to social emotional learning pieces. But they do all work together as a team as well. So, again, one of the pieces one of the things that we continue to look at is where does SEL fit, right? We've talked about this, that there isn't a 40-minute class where instructional time is sacred. So how do we just do our best to embed those practices in everything that we do? Because it helps kids, build resilience and tolerance and be open-minded and face adversity, and those are things we want kids to have to be successful. And so how do we do that in the realm of the classroom? Our teachers do a lot of that. Sometimes they just want something fresh, new, and exciting, and a second set of eyes or an observation or whatever it might be. So Jenna's job, she was a school psychologist, so I think it lends itself very well to having some specific experience, not just on the instructional side, but working with kids who don't respond to that first piece. And I think that's a crucial piece where she comes in. We've used her a lot even this year, just working with some tier 3 kids that weren't responding to some of those, even preschoolers, that weren't really responding to that initial layer of, teaching classroom management, restorative practices. They were maybe struggling a bit more, and so pulling her in to act as a coach before going to that next level of intervention through a structured problem-solving team. But all of our coaches work together. The other coaches really, I think, specialize in the instructional side. And what do those interventions and supports look like built into instruction and curriculum?
Thank you. And I just had one other question for you. I wrote down here, crisis, you had mentioned crisis teams, or are those is it just for the secondary buildings, or it's all throughout? How does that work?
So the secondary buildings are a little bit different. They have resource officers and, building principals and assistant principals. Our elementary buildings are unique in that, there's a building principal, they have a social worker, a psychologist, and the crisis team is typically, that's the team. It's the social worker, the psychologist, the building principal. In the event that you have a student maybe that is maybe struggling pretty significantly and they maybe have an IEP, they might have a special education teacher who's in the room most of the day, that person may also be part of that crisis team. But as far as who do you call in a significant disruptive, violent episode or difficulty, you would want your school psychologist or social worker administrator, maybe sometimes all or more.
Thank you for your clarification.
Well, quick question for me. I guess it's probably based more on the national conversation these days with identifying some potentially troubled students that may come back and inflict harm. Are there any strategies that are being talked about to identify at-risk students that are now being integrated into the overall learning coach activities that our teachers should be on the lookout for? Can you talk about any of those?
Wow, I'll try. So I think that's a tough question to answer. I just had this conversation with my family over the weekend. How do you know a student that's at risk is going to become significantly violent or do something to the point where we see on the news or the things that we see? I don't know the answer to that because I know that there are lots of kids that present the same way and have a similar background and they don't do those things. So I don't know what makes a student or a person, what I think we go back to in the mental wellness committee, our goal is building that resilience, having that support system, being able to, at the end of the day, no matter how bad things are, have something to be grateful for, or have the ability to be positive about things. So for me, when someone asks me that question, I think the number one thing we can do is start talking about those things, and the earlier the better. Because what makes someone resilient in the face of adversity, when you can have 4 risk factors or 100, and you can have the person with 100 risk factors be more resilient than the one with 2. I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that the things that we're working on and building the foundation, whether it's the SEL coach or data teams using the BIMS, the SEL curriculum, our regular curriculum standards, our teachers, I think it's a bigger picture of all of those things. And certainly we also want to identify kids who are making threats or violating the code of conduct and doing those things, investigating, do they have the means? Because that seems to be one of the biggest things I think that comes up when a student makes a threat or they have that history that you read in the paper. It's that they had the means, they had the access, and that's one of the biggest things that we do on our end when something like that happens is we do that investigation. So for me, I think it's the tier 1, 2, 3 supports and programs and everything all together, not just one person or a coach.
Yep, I understand. So I appreciate that. Thanks for that explanation. I guess what it comes back to me and kind of listening through the process is that it almost, and just replaying it, it would seem to me like we would need to implement some triggers to sort of think through like maybe different stages of mental health and well-being to to kind of in different activities, because SEL is supposed to be holistic, but then for identifying subsets of the student population that may be struggling more than others,
Right.
that we can certainly get that extra help for.
And I think I can answer that as well. I think I might have been confused about what you were asking. So one of the things that we do at K5, K6, 7, 12, is we do have data teams, and we are looking at sort of that multifaceted, we're looking at discipline, we're looking at attendance, but we're also looking at, now we have the BINUS. So we have longitudinal data, what's, is a student presenting with internalizing behaviors or externalizing behaviors, and then what are the supports we're putting in place. A tier 1 support might be a restorative practices, building that school culture. It's going to be, some of those SEL signature practices, the SEL curriculum, in combination with everything else. If a student isn't responding to that and they're still popping up as a concern, whether it's brought forward by a parent, it's brought forward by the data team meetings, it's brought forward by a disciplinary referral, maybe something going on in the community, we get some of those things too. There's tier 2 interventions and supports. Well, that's a referral to our problem-solving team, and maybe they need something a little bit more. And again, there's layered supports, constant conversations about not just data, but all of those pieces, what's going on with this child at home, how can we bring in the parents, how can we support them in the school community and help them be successful. At tier 3, we're looking at much more. We have school-based mental health clinics now. We're making referrals, we're triaging students that are at risk for self-harm or harming others, making threats, cutting, much more significant difficulties and problems. And then, past that, we might be looking at a BOCES referral or some other much more significant support. So there is a layered structure in place. It has been difficult the last 2 years with COVID, even just finding the time to look at data, and sometimes data was non-existent. But we're getting back to that place.
And that was my next question, so, and last one, I swear. And as we're coming out of COVID and we're getting back to quote-unquote normal life, so if I'm looking through the district report card, are we tracking statistics based on those tier segmentations as to getting a general trend of what our students' health and well-being and mental state of mind is as we're coming out of the crisis, or how are we capturing that from a pure data point of view?
Yeah, we're definitely looking at the big picture. There's all of those pieces, but I think the benchmark is the BINUS is our benchmark. It's our first snapshot, similar to if a student, an example would be a student comes in kindergarten, we benchmark them in reading and math and social emotional pieces. So we're looking for, where do we need to intervene? Do we have a concern? Is the profile similar September to winter and spring? If they pop up 2 years later, is this new? Is this no? Yep, this is a consistent difficulty for this child. They need more intervention. So it's sort of like a baseline it's a starting point. But yes, because then we have now longitudinal data that we can look at over time and sort of, I know that like one of the examples we use is now when kids go to the middle school, the teachers, when they benchmark in the fall, that this is a new student to me, and adolescence and transition to middle school is hard. So this group, I don't know them, they're struggling, changing classes, but I can look at this and I can look back and see, I think this child is struggling. They seem a little bit withdrawn. They look a little bit sad to me. Maybe they're not doing their work. They're not focused. Is this a new thing this year, fall of 6th grade at my transition to middle school, or was this something consistent and I can reach out to maybe last year's teacher or the last year's teacher and see if there were, or the school psychologist at the previous building where there were some interventions that were helpful. So I think there's lots of pieces that are really helpful now that we didn't have in the past.
Thank you for that, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Next up is the DSEP update for 2022-2023.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to apologize in advance if I start coughing really hard. I need to just take a second. I'm not sick. So we are here this evening to share with you an updated DSIP, our District's Comprehensive Improvement Plan. But along with that, obviously, would be our school teams. So we have Jen Medwid, our TSI learning coach, who's done a fantastic job working with Eldon and Durkee this school year. And then Tom Coughlin and TJ Fryer to give us an update when we get to talking about some of the work that our building teams have done. So the first document that I just wanted to circle back and share with you was actually shared back in April. And when it was shared in April, it was part of our New York State School Report Card report. Really didn't have much new data when it came to our accountability designations. Those designations, as we've talked about, have been frozen for a couple of years now, given the situation with COVID. So Eldon and Durkee continue to be identified as schools in need of targeted support and intervention. When initially identified, we were put on this list because our students at Eldon, who are identified as economically disadvantaged, were underperforming, and our students with disabilities at Durkee. But we all know that students continue to move forward, and unfortunately, that data isn't our most current data. So that's where these plans allow us the opportunity to take a look at what we've been doing and where we might have some opportunities to continue to grow. The update that I will remind you of is that for the 22-23 school year, accountability is resuming. And so what that means is we will continue to work on these plans, but probably very early on in the 22-23 school year, we will receive updated accountability designations. So we could continue to be identified, or we could be off of the plan after we've worked through this process. If that is the case, the State Education Department has informed us that the funding that we receive as part of the plans would continue even if we're no longer identified. So that's the accountability update. The next slide that I wanted to share with you is an updated timeline. We've seen this document a couple of times before, but obviously this time we're moving from year 2 into year 3. You can see that similar to what we looked at last year, we're living in right now a world of 2 years worth of plans. The 21-22 plans, we're still working to look at our end of the year data. Obviously classes aren't over, grades aren't done yet, Regents exams haven't been administered. We don't have the data for our state testing, but we did recently conclude our spring benchmarking. So as that data is coming in, we're taking the time to start to reflect on that with our teams, and we'll continue to do that. So the first bullets that you see across our timeline, back from winter all the way through this summer, as you just heard our team also present, we'll be continuing professional development, reviewing some of that data, and reflecting on any lessons learned. The second bullet from our winter plans, obviously, in order for us to continue moving forward with our 21-22 DSIP, our first priority from that plan was that our shared decision-making team and our strategic planning team would be coming together to continue to move forward on their plan work, so you can see the progression of that as well. Most recently, an accomplishment to celebrate, back in May, the board had approved the shared decision-making plan as a result of that team's work, and also approved a 1-year extension of the strategic plan that did include some minor modifications to our district's 3 main goals. So when those goals were updated, the strategic plan committee felt as though it was very important to embed the terms social, emotional, as well as cultural awareness in what was adopted. So then you can start to see how the 22-23 plans start to form. We received some initial templates back in April from the State Education Department when it came to direction and what the expectation would be for the 22-23 school year. So just beginning the planning process for next year's plans and reviewing what that expectation was. As we continue to move forward, here we are in June, and we are here tonight to give you some updates on those school comprehensive education plans, which are the school level plans that you'll see our priorities 4 and 5 in our DSIP, or that district comprehensive plan. Continued work over the summer. We will be submitting our school improvement grant to the State Education Department. We will, in conjunction with that, be securing school improvement grant funding and have those set plans approved by the first day of school in order to move into that fall timeframe where we are working toward those new commitments that we set and what you'll be hearing from our teams about tonight. So after talking about just what that process has looked like and what some of those expectations have been laid out by the State Education Department for the 22-23 plans, I really want to focus on this overview of what's been put together for our 22-23 DSIP. Again, that major celebration from our 21-22 plan of having our shared decision-making plan adopted. That was part of Priority 1. The second part of Priority 1 was to adopt that 5-year strategic plan, which in lieu of adopting the 5-year plan, the committee felt as though we still have some more work to do, work that we very much look forward to. And we're working at this point to have further conversation with RMS, which is a local research and marketing business that we've done a lot of work with in the past, and we again look forward to that work. Another priority that we have for the 22-23 DSIP is that continued commitment to ensuring diversity, equity, and inclusion for all. One of the strategies that was identified in the 21-22 plan and was a Board of Education goal was to elevate the DEI committee to a board level committee. So that's another accomplishment that we can celebrate as we continue to move into the 22-23 plan. Priority number 3, designing multi-tiered systems of targeted support and intervention. We heard a lot from the team that was just up here talking about what some of those systems of support look like, especially when it comes to the behavior side of what might be known as the RTI triangle, also known as the MTSS framework. So MTSS stands for multi-tiered systems of support. So throughout 22-23, we'll continue to focus as a district on how we can have further conversations that support our building teams. So without further ado, I know that I had already introduced Jen Medlid and our 2 school principals, but they're going to give us some updates when it comes to the great work that has been done at Eldon and at Durkee.
Okay, thank you for having us here. And we're just going to, as Danielle mentioned, we're kind of in limbo between the 21-22 plan and then the 22-23 plans being created. So I'm going to let our principals talk a little bit about some of the successes that we're celebrating with the 21-22 plans, and then I'm going to fill you in on the actions that we've taken to plan for 22-23. So we'll start with Eldon.
Thanks, Jen. I'd just like to say thank you to Danielle and Jen. It has been such a pleasure working with them this year. As you know, we've started the SEP process a couple years ago, and this year the successes really feel just extremely worthwhile. And I attribute it to these 2 ladies who have made it just so much easier, and I'm sure TJ will second that when he gets a chance to talk. And if you look back at the process from the last couple of years, it's changed in terms of just the plan in and of itself and so forth. So without further ado, some of the successes that we've had at Eldon Elementary School, if you think about the two commitments that we have, the first one is really thinking about the relevant and engaging instruction. And then you can't help not to relate it to our second commitment, where we're building relationships with our students. It really just felt much different this year in terms of when we looked at our data from the get-go, looking at the previous year's data from the summer to the fall, and always having that at the forefront. And not only is it just the data of the reading and the math, we certainly looked at students' behavior with our BINUS benchmarking and so forth. We just always kept returning back to what's best for students, which then we took advantage of the money that was given for the SEP, and we really put our heads together as a leadership team and a SEP subcommittee and designed and sought professional development that really helped our teachers and sometimes it was just as simple as why we are here, and that's for all students. And then in the background, we always kept it in our heads about we can't forget why we were on this plan in the first place, and that's our economically disadvantaged students. But as you know, the SEP changed for all students, but certainly that is something that we continue to analyze. So we have our data, and you think about the professional development that we've had from Dr. Holly and a book study for the first commitment. Some other things that we had were professional development in word problem protocol in grades 3 through 5. Actually, Joelle Fiorini, our administrative intern, and I presented at a superintendent's conference day, and it was quite amazing to really learn from her. And then we had teachers sign up throughout the school year. And basically what that entails is certainly just finding ways to teach math in a way that students find it more interesting and understanding that they can struggle with mathematics. Some other things that we've certainly enforced throughout is remembering that students and their presenting and creating and them being at the center of instruction is certainly much more fulfilling for the students and so forth. That includes choice in books, read-alouds, and so forth. If we take a look at our second commitment, one of the things you heard from Rocco Nally, our Director of Special Education, was Julie Costin. We were blessed to have her present with a book study from her book, From Behaving to Belonging. And it wasn't just inclusive education that you know of, where we have special education students, but inclusive education of students of different races, students of different learning abilities, of course, and just differences that students can and teachers can identify and create discussions and so forth. And maybe students are not feeling so great about something, but it's about building those relationships and so forth. So I'm very proud that this year these commitments really fit extremely well with one another. And other professional development that we had this year were teachers that attended responsive classroom training, which is very intensive. It may seem very simple, but it's just putting the students at the center and approaches about how students can learn better. And not only with learning, but also with identifying discipline and so forth, and how teachers can approach it differently with kids at the center. And you may think, well, aren't kids at the center all the time? But sometimes we forget that. And it's that great professional development that leads us as a good reminder. We've had an arts and ed budget that was given to us of $9,000. We actually surpassed it in terms of bringing guests back into the building and that was just since March. And field trips, we went through it and we had such a great time finding excellent activities for students. Previously in the year when we're not allowed to go on field trips or have visitors into the building, we did it virtually. And we actually ran out of money, and I talked to our business office and they said put it in, and we actually went over about $700. So we're very proud of that at Eldon Elementary School, and we're hoping for even more money for next year for these wonderful events. Tomorrow we have 2 groups, one going to Baltimore Woods and Camp Tululi is the other group, so we're very excited. We also had a subcommittee at Eldon Elementary School for our DEI committee, and which certainly enlightens the rest of the staff in how we can see differences among our students. And as you can see, the other professional development that we talked about really intertwined and fit extremely well together. We continued with our check-in, check-out program, which is really something that is quite simple, but it's making sure all students in the building who need a person to check in with, that we have a staff member that can check in the morning and check out in the afternoon to see how their day went. So as you can see, building relationships is at our forefront. We've had a project called the self-portrait project, as well as family portraits in the hallways, just to show not only our staff but our students who we are. And it included families from Eldon and included our staff's families as well. We had a multicultural crayon project that the PTA funded, where students will be getting crayons that is of their skin color. So it's really something that we are very proud of at Eldon. We continued with our Golden Table Award, where students were honored by showing and demonstrating the 3 B's, being respectful, being responsible, and being safe. And we had the most tickets awarded this year. And each month we have, I'm sure you've seen my tweets on Twitter, where the students, we decorate their cafeteria tables. It may seem really corny, but they absolutely eat it up. And it just fits really well with our 3 B's as well as the Positivity Project. I'm very proud to say that we were one of the first schools to have Liberty Resources. We continue to always have a waiting list, which may be a double-edged sword, so to speak, but we're very excited to have a Liberty Resources counselor on site. We have an SEL coach with the district, which is phenomenal to have a resource that we can call to give us some extra pointers in terms of what we could be doing better to reach our students that may be struggling. We had this year a part-time Promise Zone person through Onondaga County, which was wonderful to have to meet with students to improve our SEL and our SEL like curriculum in terms of how we're helping students. And Rocco Nally and from special ed was extremely wonderful this year with regard to giving us a access person or somebody from Onondaga County who met with my team weekly to talk about students, and access representative was very wonderful in terms of helping connect a family that might be struggling with housing, might be struggling with needing of how to get certain medical treatment, such as classes for their children, or maybe family counseling as well. And I have to say, Carrie Lamacchia was wonderful in assisting as well in terms of getting an access person, and we really utilized that person, and it's been really just phenomenal. One last thing is our enrichment activities that we had. I'm proud to say Eldon Elementary School had the most after-school activities out of all of the schools, and I'm very proud of it, and we look forward to it for next year. So, thank you.
So as we finish out the year at Eldon, we're going to look at our achievement data, which a lot of won't even be in our hands until September, but we'll continue to analyze and find more effective ways to kind of bring together all of these different services that we have in place. And that brings us to Derby.
As Tom said, I'll second what he says, so I'll take any questions. No, on a serious note, as you know, Dirty has been identified for our students with disabilities. So we've worked really hard with the support of our special education department, specifically Rocco Nolly, and but he's been very supportive of what we've done, or to help us, show us the support to give the students the support that they need. Our first commitment was to provide a relevant and cohesive curriculum through our instructional practices. We did some great things. We were able to build consistent co-teaching teams that the students, the time we're able to give them when it's consistent. What I mean by consistent is you have the same regular education teacher and the same special education teacher working together 5 periods a day. It wasn't like that prior at Derby, but what that does, it allows me to give time for them to give some common planning so they can work to the needs of the students. Not just the academic piece, but the social piece and all of those other things that go into making a student successful. So all of those teams, we have 8 teams, I would say 8.5 teams of teachers in Derby that work together. They all went to and took time out of their own schedule, and it was really it just shows how awesome they are and how invested they were. It was like a 2-week turnaround by the time that we had to register for the Julie Costin, who you've heard about, for her webinars, and I was able to get all 8 teams to buy in, and they were able to go and get some training, and as I said, that was a big commitment by the teachers that the students benefit from. Something else that we've done is we've really listened to the students and the voice and choice professional development that was offered. This is what we mean by this: the students are more vested in asking and telling us how they want to be taught and what they want to be taught. We did do a survey, and we found that 60% of the students in that survey indicated that they had some choice in the learning process throughout the year. So that says a lot to that. We developed some new courses based on some of this voice and choice, some of the needs and interests of the students. We had the gaming concepts course that was instituted this year. We have that this year, and it just connects some students that weren't connected to school. It's a connection there, and they're learning some great skills and learning the history of gaming in the industry, the media industry. Next year, you've approved for us the Creating Legends course, which will be an English 9 credit. Very excited. We have right now 3 sections of that. So the students that's roughly almost 75 students that signed up for that course. And we've worked with Dr. Holly, as you've heard. One thing that we've done that's going to help our curriculum and instructional practices, next year we've gone away from our link period that we have now in the middle of the day, that's lunch. We didn't find that productive, because how that works is a student is in a study hall for 25 minutes, then they have a lunch, then in study hall for 25 minutes. That's it. Or they're in study hall for 50 minutes and lunch 30, and so on. So what we've done is reconfigured our bell schedule, so at the end of the day, the last period of the day is going to be a 40-minute period of academic time. There's no instruction, there's no classes going on. So that's where the students will get their support. There will be help labs. It'll be a time that, it's just a period of the day that we can make for the students and get them the help that they need. Our second commitment was making a welcoming and deepening environment through connections. We've worked really hard to let the students get, as you just heard me say, the choice in what they're learning, but actually we're trying to give them a little bit more of a choice of how the school day goes and how the school day looks. So this year, with the help of Jen, we came up with the Student Advisory Council. This is where we ask students, and anybody could be part of this, to come in, and we've discussed this year two big topics. Is we had this academic time. How we developed the academic time came from what we heard during that Student Advisory Council and some of their ideas. So it really helped us there. Plus, it helped us in our discussions of the Code of Conduct Committee, the District Code of Conduct. So we had 2 student members that were part of this advisory council that were the voice of that advisory council on the Code of Conduct Committee with Mr. Kilcourse. And excuse me, it was a lot of dress code, but they brought some good views on how they see dress code should be handled. And it was also a time for them to hear from us why certain things have to happen the way they do. Sometimes students don't understand that there's a reason why it's not just Mr. Ferrer being a tough guy. So those are 2 things that came out of that advisory council that I thought were great. Club offerings, again, comes back to the voice and choice. There hasn't been a club that has been, we have the policy that if a student wants to start a club, they write a proposal, they find an advisor, they run the proposal by me. I haven't had one yet that I haven't approved, but we've had this year, we've had the Acceptance Coalition, the esports programming, that was last year they started, and most recently a Pokemon club that Mr. White has taken on. But I thought that was a little guy thing, but man, those guys get into it. We also, just some recognition celebrations. We had our GPA growth that I know some of you were able to make, and I thank you. Positivity Project, we recognize students, and students recognize teachers on some of the traits through the Positivity Project. Our mental wellness and social emotional learning. We just most recently had the presentation of Dr. Gibbs. This year we celebrated the whole month of Mental Wellness Month, and every Monday gave some statistics, and one of the students gave statistics over the announcement, and it was very beneficial. Promise Zone support, a lot of the things that Tom has mentioned have been very successful at Derby as well, supporting students. And finally, we had our first committee in this committee for our building plan, and we have parent involvement. We had two parents that were part of our development, and that's something that we're going to build on and have committees where now that we can have visitors, that we have parents, all stakeholders have a say in the committee and the decisions that are made. So those are the great things we're doing at Derby. Thank you.
All right, so I want to give you some insight into the planning process for next year. And so this slide runs through the steps that we took. Once we were informed by State Ed what they wanted the process to look like, we started to plan to get these plans, basically they'll be written by the end of the week, and we can start making edits to them and kind of planning for implementation over the summer. So the first thing we did was we set meeting dates. All of the meetings we were able to have after school because we were able to get parents who were supportive and could meet at that time to join us. So I'm very thankful. I want to take a second and just say thank you to the teachers and the admin and the parents who took their time from their busy schedules to help us to kind of reflect on what's going on in our school and how our students are feeling and what their lives look like, and come up with these plans. So as a team, one of the things that we looked at is student data, and really that kind of street level data where we're talking to kids and getting feedback from kids. And one of the bonuses is that I'm in the schools, so I'm hearing what the kids are talking about, I'm hearing what the teachers talk about, and so I can kind of bring that perspective to things. I'm really proud that we were able to climate survey every single child in both buildings. So we spent a week with elementary school kids talking about whether they felt welcome and whether they belonged in school and what that looked like and sounded like. And the Derby English department made it so that we got feedback from every single kid in the building. It was pretty awesome. So the climate surveys, the results of the climate surveys, when we took a look at them as a team, they really drove what our student interview questions were going to look like. So in both buildings, they came up with a set of interview questions, and we sat down with students. At Eldon, we had teams of 5 students from each class in 4th and 5th grade, and we talked to them. And then at Derby, we utilized our student advisory committee, and we also kind of pinpointed a couple different classes to get a more diverse perspective on things. We recorded all of their responses, and we went over them as a team. The third part of the process was completing the equity self-reflection. The state kind of changed up what we look at here. It was based on the 4 areas of the culturally responsive sustaining education framework. So we looked at welcoming environment, high expectations and rigorous instruction, inclusive curriculum and assessment, and professional development and support, and talked about the strengths that our buildings had, and then the areas for growth that our buildings had. And from all of this, we set we made a pretty big T-chart with notes of things that we were getting better at or doing really well with, and then areas where we have opportunities for growth, and then we worked to prioritize those. So that was kind of as we clarified the priorities. It was really important to both teams in both buildings to not heap a bunch of initiatives onto the laps of our teachers and our administrative staff. And so you're going to hear a lot of continuation of what we've already worked on, and some of the district priorities for next year is all kind of woven into what we're doing. So this year, both buildings came up with 3 priorities. Last year we did 2. The 2 priorities last year were a little bit general. I think this helps us to kind of compartmentalize things a little bit differently. And so Eldon, one of the things we talked a lot about is the transition that this year was, and kind of coming out of this COVID period needs a restart button. And so the idea of going slow to go fast is really important to the team, and looking at not just the workshop model that the professional development is on in the summer, but also just slowing down and really getting to know our students and setting up our expectations and working on the 3 Bs that Tom mentioned is going to be a big part of Eldon's work. Our surveys and our student interviews show that the majority of our students are engaged in activities. They receive the support they need. They say they have friends. They feel cared for. They feel welcome. There's people that they can go to for help. So there's a lot of real positive data that we collected. But there's still about 10% to 20% in some cases that we just have to get to. And so that's the priority of the group, is to reach those kids in different ways. So priority number 1, we commit to every child being supported and engaged in meaningful learning that's relevant to them. That's a continuation of last year's, just a little different wording. A lot of our students understand that their work is important, but they don't necessarily always find it relevant. So relevance plays a key role here. They did mention, and you're going to see some themes here. Choice is a theme, and connection is a big theme in both of the buildings. When they have more choices that they're more engaged in what they're asked to do. So as part of that commitment, we're going to look into getting Eldon some professional development and bringing more voice and choice into the elementary classroom. It's a little bit easier to integrate at the secondary level. And so we're going to kind of bring that into the elementary building. In addition, building current events, looking at student cultures and student interests, like Pokemon, for example, into our curriculum and materials is an important move for us. In addition, this says every child being supported, and so we're going to be reorganizing and looking at our multi-tiered systems of support, especially our RTI programs, in order to make sure all of the students are receiving that support that they need. Number 2 is we commit to ensuring every child has its strong, trusting relationships with adults and peers by providing intentional opportunities to build those social, cognitive, and emotional skills. So everybody that's talked to you tonight has talked about integrating SEL into the things that we do in the classroom, and this is another piece of that, so I don't want to get too much into it because you've already heard a lot of it, but utilizing Second Step, looking at our BIMUS data, building in more positivity projects, talking about check-in, check-out. A lot of our students talked about, I think some of the things we took for granted prior to COVID that kids just did naturally, or we had already built that into our day. Safety in the bathrooms, safety in the hallways, being kind to each other, even though it's a piece of the positivity project, we're not always seeing it transfer to how they treat each other on the playground, especially because so many of them have been isolated for so long. And so leveraging those resources that we have, and then building more proactive relationship building into what we do. So that's where that restorative practice piece comes in. That's going to be a district initiative for next year. All of this will be supported by our coaches, our specialists, Liberty, Promise Zone, our SEL committee that we started at Eldon this year. Shrinking ratios when possible, so bringing more adults into the classroom so that the students have those adults to support them, and providing multiple check-in methods for students to kind of tell staff how they're doing. In addition, one of the things that we want to work towards is restarting our high school mentorship program. We used to be able to bring students from Baker into Eldon, and I have a meeting next week to kind of start that process back up again. Commitment number 3, we commit to providing an environment where every child feels safe, respected, supported, and a true sense of belonging. So a piece of this is building that consistency in expectations and supervision of building behavior. The 3 B's is huge. The kids know them. We want them to make sure that they're following them all the time. Building more inclusive learning environments. So we'll be understanding and celebrating diverse student cultures and backgrounds. We do that with the support of our DEI committee, and building more inclusive curricular materials, and having push-in support where it's possible. So strengthening those co-teaching teams and providing in-classroom RTI support when we can. Another piece of this is bringing our relationships, improving our relationships with families. So one of the practices that Eldon used to do regularly was to go to River Knoll and have River Knoll nights. So our leadership team has talked about bringing those back. And just in general, having that proactive approach to making connections with students so that they feel safe and supported. Now all of this is going to run right together, but I'm going to go right into Durkee now and talk a little bit about that. Obviously, when we're talking about 13 to 15-year-olds, they're a little bit more willing to share their honest opinions, and they have a very different view of school at that particular age. So we got a lot of really good feedback, and that Student Advisory Council has been a really interesting place to learn from students. As we, meeting to meeting, we had different topics that we covered, and they were very willing to share their opinions. On our climate survey, we noticed that 90% of students really want to do well. They feel that their teachers have high expectations of them. They feel like their teachers are invested in their learning. What we didn't see was a lot of really honest excitement about that learning process. And so one of the follow-up questions we had with students at Durkee is, okay, what makes you excited to be here? Why do you want to come to school each day? And so some of the feedback there we got is a lot of hands-on learning, gamification, giving them choices, and building connections in what we teach them to the outside world, bringing in that relevance piece again. With that, a lot of our students told us that if the teachers aren't making connections with them, they don't feel motivated to learn as much. And so that connection piece is so crucial, especially at that 13 to 15-year-old age where they don't want to admit that they want those connections. But when we talk to them about what makes you hesitant to ask for help, because we had 90% of students saying, I want to do well, and then we had 60% of students saying they feel comfortable asking for help. And we wanted to figure out what was kind of driving that difference. And they said, well, the teachers have to be available, the teachers have to be able to, want to talk to me, basically. The students want to talk to the teachers. And so that communication and connection piece is huge. So, saying that, We commit to increasing opportunities for student success by providing additional support and enrichment for students' cognitive, social, and emotional learning during the school day, and that's really important here. So TJ already blew up my spot and talked about the reorganization of the master schedule, and so that's a big piece of this that we've already started that's going to go into place. And so continuing to kind of analyze, is this working? How can we use this? But what that academic period gives us is help labs for every student, possibilities for enrichment programming, whether it be social programming or our student advisory committee throughout the year said they're interested in real life stuff. They want to learn about taxes. They want to learn about other things. So it does give us that freedom to build some of those things in. Continued support for those co-teaching teams and our special educators, building those SEL skills into the curriculum, and of course, building that connection with Promise Zone and other Tier 2 interventions through BIMAS. Number 2 here is to commit to providing meaningful and relevant learning experiences that allow increased opportunities for student voice and choice. That 60% number that we had students say that they had some voice and choice was a huge increase. It was like a 30 percentage point increase from the year before when we surveyed students. A lot of our humanities areas are really using voice and choice in their classrooms, so students get choice of how they're going to present material, or they might get a choice in topic of what they're going to learn about. In some cases, they get a choice in how they take notes. So they might be able to watch a video and take notes, or meet with the teacher, or read it and take notes. They could stand up and take notes. They could sit down and take notes. So lots of choice built into things. In addition, our ELA department continues to build in choice texts, and I think that's one of the things I'll talk about here in a couple minutes. And those choice texts come from diverse lenses and diverse perspectives that weren't in the curriculum before. We have these new core course options, like the Creating Legends ELA course. There's some interest in other teachers creating more courses like that would build on student interest. So one of those would be perhaps a journalism course, is something that some teachers are interested in putting together. We want to support teachers in building lessons that include cultural relevance, current events, and civic engagement, and to continue expanding those leadership opportunities for students in the building. And last but not least, we commit to creating a safe, inclusive, and welcoming environment for learning by deepening connections between our students, staff, and the community. So again, this is mostly a continuation of last year. Here too, students called for consistency in rules and policies, and some of that was addressed through the code of conduct work that students did. The district initiative for restorative practices is going to play a role here. And we're looking to connect with students and connect with families. So we will take on some more responsibility for learning about the cultures that exist in our building, the continued DEI work. We have a great DEI chairperson in our building. Evaluating our communication strategies in order to reach all families and coming up with different ways to communicate so that everybody hears what we're doing in the building. And some return of our parent programs that we haven't been able to have in a few years. We also want students connecting with each other, so giving them flexible days, fun activities, extracurriculars, and that extra period at the end of the day gives us a chance to work some of that in as well. All of this in both buildings is going to be supported by professional development, extended PLC time at Eldon, and teacher collaboration. One of the awesome things about both of these buildings is they have teachers that are so dedicated and want so much professional development, and they're really ready to work for students. So it makes me proud to work with them. And that is all I have.
So now we're certainly willing to answer any questions that anybody has.
A couple of questions for me. It's so how did we allocate all the funding that we had from the last DSIP, and because I know Tom was mentioning a few things, sounded like we went over budget on potentially a couple of things. Is that, or was that outside of the DSIP fund?
So we have multiple funding sources, but when it comes to the work of Eldon and Durkee, we really have tried to run as much through our school improvement grant as possible. So when it comes to the district portion of the school improvement grant this year, much of the district portion funds some of Jen's salary, and the remaining portions would come from the Eldon and Durkee plan, or excuse me, funds out of the school improvement grant. the professional development that you heard of when it comes to not only the presenters themselves, so Dr. Julie Costa being one of them, also the time that staff spend outside of contractual hours. Much of the grant money for both of those buildings also goes toward that. In addition to that, their after-school meetings, whether it's their leadership team or, like I mentioned, some of that professional development or the resources that go along with the professional development. Tom mentioned the book study, Behaving to Belonging, is an example of some of the materials that were purchased through that grant. Just to separate out, those enrichment programs that are happening after school are actually funded through the American Rescue Plan Fund, so it's a separate federal grant than what the school improvement grant monies come out of.
Okay, so the majority went for professional development and workshopping. Okay.
Yes.
That's clear. So, go back to data, my favorite topic, right? So, just reviewing the plans from the one that's going into 2022-2023 versus 21-22, seems like there's consistent information between the two, but and I know that this plan was intended to be updated as we go along. Have we thought about what the baselining of some of the measurements and what actual improvements look like for special education for the economically disadvantaged children that were part of this plan? I understand they've moved on, and we don't have all the data this year, but have we thought about some measures of success and how it fits in with the district report card that we can factor in?
I'm always thinking about that report card, Frank. But I'll speak to the all students portion, and then we can certainly drill down into some of those subgroups as always. But when it comes to that bigger picture data, we know that our students coming out of what they've experienced being on remote, hybrid schedules, adjusting to being back in person while at the same time contracting the virus, being out on isolation, being out on quarantine, those are all things that are real and things that we've experienced this year, and things that our staff have experienced this year too. And so I feel like last summer, I know myself, with having very few COVID cases, I think today we had one that was reported, one. It's a very optimistic feeling, right? And then we hit October-ish, and that's when it started getting crazy again. And so working as much as I can in my position to be able to collaborate with other districts, collaborate with our regional partners, and most recently I attended a user group session that was offered by Renaissance Learning, and I wouldn't be surprised if you actually see some of their reports coming out nationwide. I think I saw one in the news as recently as this weekend. What national organizations are starting to present is that they're finding that students' learning loss, quote unquote learning loss, is incremental. And so some of the data trends that we noticed last year have actually become a little bit more severe, as opposed to, I think, what we were all hoping, that we've committed so much time and energy and work to try to put things in place to make up for it, but why are we still continuing to see some of those incremental discrepancies? And so I can say that in some of that benchmarking data that I've started to look at, from my perspective, it's important that we just continue to strive for continuous improvement, whatever that starting point may be. Even if it's this year's benchmarking data, can we compare next year fall to fall? Can we compare winter to winter? Can we compare spring to spring? So in that Renaissance report that I was referring to, they actually took a very deep look at that at the state level and at the national level to say, where did students across the state or across the nation fall? And they, in their report, compared winter to winter in the graphic that I'm picturing. But again, the trends that are being noticed here in Baldwinsville are similar to the trends regionally, statewide, and nationally. So I think it's important that as we move forward, we keep some of those comparisons in mind as we try to really hone in on what is that ideal baseline and what is an ideal goal, because we know as far as this plan goes, typically that striving for 80% of students at or above grade level, right now that feels very far off. And it's not to say that people are not working overtime to try to change some of that.
That's great, thank you for that. Maybe one last one for me and then I'll yield. So a couple of times it was mentioned that we're working on strategies around choice of student engagements, and another one that I wrote down was kids at the center of restorative practices or discipline in the classrooms. And just kind of curious, how are we relating that to, previously Carrie was talking about the mental health and wellness committees, and are we, and that's certainly some of the dashboarding that you're doing as well. Is that something we're trying to measure as well, the new strategies that are being put into place and how all that ties together and baseline student performance from there?
Sure, and I'll speak to that from the district level, and certainly feel free to jump in. I have to laugh because when Carrie was speaking, Jen and I were looking at each other. I was like, I did not pay her to say that. And I was like, I just hope that she could sit right up here and echo some of the things that I was thinking about preparing for tonight. But we shared with the Mental Wellness Committee at our last meeting a graphic that compared our students in grades 7 through 12 self-reporting on the VIMUS from fall to spring. And what we noticed, this term we've kind of always circled back to, is grow the green. And while we certainly want to triage the red or students who there's that most concern about, and we'll continue to do that work, the big picture growth comes when we really try to grow the green. And so those 5 SEL skills that we report out on the district report card, when you compare fall to spring, we grew in every single one of those 5 areas, the green, but specifically student self-awareness was one of the greatest areas of concern, meaning that most or a lot of students who rated were resulting as being in need of a large amount of intervention, or somebody that might have fallen within that on watch range. And so we still have more work to do. That continues to be our greatest area of need, is self-awareness, but we still continue to see, to your question before, students move from maybe that red to the yellow or the yellow to the green. Or we also saw students move from the typical area of strength to a area of strength. So some of those trends you can see in the dashboard, but I will say my brain is turning as well as how we can better visualize some of that growth, because unless you're changing the filter between fall and spring or what have you, you might not necessarily notice some of that trend. So I will certainly be sure to report out on that as part of our end of the year wrap up, but I would say even when it comes to our academic screeners, one of the trends that we're noticing is that we are moving students when it comes to an area of intervention to somebody who's progressing more toward grade level expectation. Anything anybody want to add?
I think I can speak to, at least at the secondary level, when we look at universal design for learning, which is kind of a framework that voice and choice falls into, the idea of students planning, setting goals for their learning. So if you give them a choice of outcome, a choice of project that they're going to create, just to kind of put in basic terms, they're going to need to find out how to get to that finish line. And so providing them with those opportunities to develop their executive functioning skills, their ability to self-start, their ability to ask for questions, to self-monitor their progress, leads to huge strides in that, in the VIMUS and in some of that SEL data.
I had a couple questions. I wrote it down when we were talking about Eldon, but it probably applies to more than that. But sounds like a lot of great work, a lot of great successes this year. Did you discover that any of them work so well that they should be best practices for the district, and how do we, some of those things you discovered, move those into other schools? I was thinking the elementaries, but there's probably some stuff at Derby that could be moved along, but any examples of that, you know, you found such great success with that it'd be worth moving that into the other buildings and, you know.
Well, in terms of restorative practices to address Mr. Mattis as well as yours, what were you thinking at the time that you just asked that question? Is part of restorative practices? It's not just for discipline, but that's certainly something we started with Alden Elementary School a few years ago prior to COVID. And it really gives all of the students a voice. So with our hope is that we've had teachers utilizing this over the last couple of years. It's not just in terms of discipline and to be proactive and so forth, but to use restorative practices for when students learn a new concept and they can use a circle in the classroom. And that is something that's going across the district. Also, our DEI subgroup is a district committee, certainly understanding where children are coming from, as well as that connection with the SEL curriculum. So there are things that are going on in other schools. Derby and Alden are fortunate enough to present to the Board of Education. So I do know that a lot of this is going on at the other schools. So I think that may answer your question, but those are two things that are huge at Alden, and the students are really responding well. I mean, if you think of the DEI committee in terms of our Parent-Teacher Association, we have a book vending machine, and we made sure to incorporate book covers that look like our children. And it's been just fantastic in terms of the students getting caught reading, and they also get caught using the 3 Bs, and they get tickets and they can get a book. And so that's been just tremendous. So those are really two things that have like subheadings of other things that we have in the building that are just phenomenal.
And I think what Tom said is things are happening in other buildings, but we're the ones here presenting because we're on the plan. The co-teaching model that we're using at Derby came from Baker. So it's something they were doing, was successful at Baker, so I mean, we're doing that in our district. So that's where that wasn't a TJ idea, that was TJ brought that from Baker because it was successful at Baker. So I think a lot of this stuff, as Tom said, is happening across the district. And we are sharing that stuff with each other. But again, we're the ones here presenting it. But other buildings are doing great things as well.
Yeah, and again, this is an every building thing, but we throw out a lot of terms like SEL and restorative practice and responsive classroom, but all of them have this underlying theme of making connections with students. I used to tell my 10th grade global history students, like, if I'm ever a curriculum robot and I'm just up here yelling facts at you, like, you need to call me on it because that's not the teacher I want to be for you. And so developing the comfort of teachers in doing that and being willing to maybe do a circle. You guys have done a restorative circle at a board meeting. You know what that looks like. And it only takes a few minutes of time, but to build those connections with students so that they're more invested in what you're going to teach them in the long run.
And just one more, can you hear me? Yeah. I think Tom mentioned Liberty Resources and there's a wait list backlog there. I don't know, I'm assuming that's true across some other buildings. Have we looked into maybe, you know, how do we resolve? Is it a Liberty Resource issue, or is it a funding issue that we just need to get more Liberty Resources into the buildings, or?
So we actually have on the agenda tonight, based on need and request later on under new business, where we have an agreement for the 22-23 school year. We're actually adding 2 additional part-time Liberty Resources in 2 buildings. Based on need there. So they monitor that data, They go to the district. Rocco, Carrie meets on a regular basis with those individuals or agencies, and based on need, we come back and add additional.
And Joe, to add to that point, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's there's a certain amount of caseload that they can take. So, you know, unfortunately in these times, there, as we all know, there's so much mental health needs. So we're trying to address it.
To add to that conversation too, we shared with the Mental Wellness Committee some of the BIMAS data. As you know, we've spoken about one of the items on the BIMAS being a question asking about how many times within the last week or how often would you rate that you think of self-harm. And what we saw in last year's data was that 17 to 20% of students were rating that question, even if it might have been at a level 1 or at the extreme at the level 5. And so this year we noticed that has decreased, but in looking at the anecdotal data related to that, many of the students who rated last school year are in contact with these supports, whether it's in the district or outside of the district. So while there's certainly room for growth given those limited case numbers with Liberty, it continues to be an area of need, but getting students connected with the supports that they need is just continuing to show how beneficial it can be.
Sorry, I have one more question. You mentioned that, is it your understanding that the DSIP funding will continue even after? I thought I caught that.
Seems crazy, right? I know. So this year we have $50,000 allocated toward the district and $75,000 allocated toward each of the 2 schools for a total of $200,000. The state has indicated that they continue to see that amount allocated toward districts in our position. But again, once those accountability measures get reinstated, even if our data shows that we are no longer identified, we continue to receive that funding for the 22-23 school year. Thank you all.
A lot of great work. Thank you, guys.
So one final piece with that. So on the next board agenda, we'll have action to actually approve the DSIP on June 27th.
Joe, you can continue.
Still up. Textbook adoption for this text. This is for Derby Junior High School. It'll appear on the next meeting for final approval. I of Minds. And this is to speak to the trend here this evening for the Creating Legends course at Derby Junior High School, and this is a choice text. Any questions?
I have no questions. I just want to say that I really appreciated the information. It just seemed like it was more thorough on there with, saying that it's definitely a choice book. It's not something that we have to remember, but we can actually go back to the document itself in time and look. And also with some of the tough issues, just that foresight and how they're going to handle that in the classroom was good to see, and writing just kind of process and understanding why the book is being used the way it is. Thank you to those who filled that out.
So you'll see for first reading the following policies, the one that went back, the 1000 series, and then a portion of the 3000 series. Again, I just want to thank the policy committee. They've done a lot this year, and we're bringing these forward. Are there questions with specific policies here? They'll appear for final approval at the next meeting.
And would say Joe did a lot of work on the policy committee this year as well, with all those changes and being, proactive and getting some of that work done before we even met in anticipation of the things that we'd be requesting. So thank you. So we'll move on to new business. Item A, resolved that the Board of Education approve the revisions to the Baldwinsville Central School District Code of Conduct pursuant to the attached. Can I have a motion, please? Jeff first. Second, Brian. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Passes 8-0. Item B, resolved that the Board of Education approve the textbook adoption of the Iliad by Gareth Hines to be used in grades 9 ELA classes at Durkee Junior High School pursuant to the attached. Can I have a motion, please? Joan first. Second, Matt. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Passes 8-0. Item C, resolved that the Board of Education approve the textbook adoption of Warcross by Marie Liu to be used in grade 9 ELA classes at Durkee Junior High School pursuant to the attached. Can I have a motion, please? Jeff first. Second, Shelley. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Passes 8-0. Item D, resolved that the Board of Education approve the textbook adoption of The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins to be used in grades 9 ELA classes at Durkee Junior High School pursuant to the attached. Can I have a motion, please? Frank first.
Second.
Shelley second. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Passes 8-0. Item E. Oh, I'm sorry, Joe.
Here we go.
Do we need to go back? How far do we go back?
No, it's not saving, hold on.
You're too far away to kick me to slow down, I'm sorry.
I see the issue. It's listed as a consent item for C, there's 4 items. Hold on. Kim's actually the one that made the mistake, not me. It's listed as consent if anyone wants to. I'm trying to fix
You
it.
get all the first and seconds on those?
I did get the first and seconds, but just
Okay.
I'll move on to the next one. So just to clarify for D, it was Jeff and Shelley, right?
Frank.
Oh, I'm sorry, Frank, yeah. And you voted, right?
Yes.
All in favor?
So we're
And
ready to
let's get vote on
start.
E. Yep,
E, when you're ready?
we're good.
Okay. Item E, resolved that the Board of Education approve the award of the Universal Pre-Kindergarten RFP to Peace Incorporated pursuant to the attached. Can I have a motion, please? Joan first.
Second.
Second, Brian. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Passes 8-0. Item F, resolved that the Board of Education approve the Health and Welfare Services Agreement and costs with the Janesville DeWitt School District pursuant to the attached. Can I have a motion, please? Denise first. Second, Jeff. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Passes 8-0. Item G, resolved that the Board of Education authorize the Superintendent of Schools to execute on its behalf the collective bargaining agreement between the Baldwinsville Central School District and the Baldwinsville Transportation Support Staff Association for the period July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2026. And be it further resolved that the Board of Education fund the collective bargaining agreement between the Baldwinsville Central School District and the Baldwinsville Transportation Support Staff Association for the period July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2026 pursuant to the attached. Can I have a motion, please? Denise first. Second, Shelley. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Passes 8-0. Item H, resolved that the Board of Education approve the office supply bid number 392 pursuant to the attached. Can I have a motion, please? Brian first, Jeff second. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Passes 8-0. Item I, resolved that the Board of Education approve the disposal of surplus equipment and instructional materials pursuant to the attached. Can I have a motion, please? Shelley first, Denise second. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Passes 8-0. Item J, resolved that the Board of Education approve the award of contract for 2016 Capital Improvement Project Phase 4 to S.J. Thomas and Company Incorporated pursuant to the attached. Can I have a motion, please? Joan first, second Matt. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Passes 8-0. Item K, resolved that the Board of Education approve the agreement between the Baldwinsville Central School District and Liberty Resources for site services for September 1st, 2022 to August 31st, 2023 pursuant to the attached. Can I have a motion, please? Shelley first, second Jeff. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Passes 8-0. Item L, resolved that the Board of Education approve the resolution approving the addendum to the employment agreement with the superintendent of schools, Jason D. Thompson, pursuant to the attached. Can I have a motion, please? I think that was Frank first, Joan second. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Passes 8-0. We've now moved to the roundtable portion of the meeting. I have a few items, but I'll see if anyone else has anything first.
I think it's important to mention, and I know, Jason, you've kind of addressed this individually and through communications, but there's a lot of anxiety about kind of the safety in schools and that. We've recently adopted our safety plan, but I think it's important to kind of realize that we approach it from many different lenses. One we heard about tonight, Frank, you asked about the kind of addressing some of the mental health and those kinds of things. But we also have our Heart in Schools, we have our training, so I think that it's important to get out there that, we are consciously and actively addressing issues of safety in the schools.
Every second.
Okay, I just have a few housekeeping items first. Next Monday, we're going to have the board self-evaluation, and I know that some people have already completed theirs. This is just a reminder, if you guys can have that all completed by 8 a.m. Monday morning, then I can do my job on the back end to make sure we're ready for Monday night that evening, and also make sure you have something so you can access it. So we're all looking at the same thing, like a Chromebook or some electronic device with you that night. The second item, it was in the Friday letter, the NISBA Area 4 Director, Sandra Russo, is up for re-election. Joan sent us a copy of the resolution from 2018 as a sample. It doesn't mean that we're voting for it, it's just looking for a nomination. I'm not sure if she's going to be running unopposed or not. Do we want to go ahead and do that? We have to take action on it if we do, and then a letter needs to go over.
And then the letter goes.
And then the letter goes to the NISBA office in Latham. Is everyone okay with nominating Sandra to represent Area 4 again? Let's say Section 4, that's athletics. Area 4 for NISBA.
Are you asking if we should put that on the agenda to take action, or are you asking if we're going to make a resolution to take action now?
No, Joan gave us a sample. It needs to be updated because the years need to be changed. So she sent us a sample from 2018.
I wasn't sure what your question was. Are we okay with
Right, are we okay with having a resolution drafted for us to take action on at the next meeting?
Yeah, she does a very good job.
Okay. We'll work on that. And then the next item I wanted to throw out there is, for consideration, is a new committee for next year. I'm just trying to expand and find more opportunities for our students. The proposed name of it would be the Future Opportunities Committee, and purposely left that broad because I'm not sure what will generate, what will come from it. It's really, I'm looking at it as a place for conversations and sharing and generating ideas that can lead to more and different types of opportunities for all of our students, kind of like more of like a think tank idea, which would include different stakeholder groups. You know, we obviously have our teachers and our parents, our students, but kind of pulling in people from the community, business opportunities, looking at internships, mentorship, possibilities. I mean, it could go into a lot of different areas. It's more of a forward thinking. What comes out of it could be, you know, utilized next year. It could be more 5 years down the road. And just really just starting a conversation as to what other opportunities and outside the box thinking we can have to put our students in even a better place than Baldwinsville Central Schools already does.
Love it. I think it's great. I think just to kind of tack onto that, I had the opportunity during strategic planning to sit with a couple of our students, 11th graders, and it struck me a couple of things that they noted. One is, and maybe this is, maybe it's because of the last couple of years with COVID, maybe not, and I don't know, but it's something to keep in mind is, the comment was made that there is a recognition that juniors and seniors in particular, and they were referencing their peers, don't have enough access to life skills sorts of things, balancing a checkbook. They claim doing taxes, but nobody really knows how to do the taxes. The software does it for you. But it's sort of those sorts of things that would be things that we should consider more. The other piece was that, and I don't know, again, this putting it through the lens of the last couple of years and trying to put myself into their shoes is access to career counseling and different directions that they can go. And are we as a district, can we do more as a district to promote different opportunities? And I think that's a lot of the discussions we've had over the last year certainly lead in that direction. But I think something like that committee would be fantastic to dive into.
From thinking back, you know, I jotted down when they were presenting today with Derby, you know, one piece was the relevance piece to what we're doing and making it more engaging for the students. And what you just said was kind of an area I was thinking, you know, to help the College and Career Center. We know we're looking at our K through 12 counseling program, and a piece that they're embedding is that career piece, starting in the early elementary grades, you know, what opportunities, who can volunteer some time, making connections. We know that businesses are looking for employees, you know, what better opportunity than to connect them to the school, students figuring out, I thought I wanted to do that, but I'm glad I found out I don't want to do that, and my parents spend a lot of money on a college education. Just doing whatever we can to kind of broaden their view outside of our walls and connect it to what they're learning inside of our teachers.
I agree, and even go back to the conversations tonight around mental health and well-being, and maybe a feeling of despair that these, you know, a lot of our students, some of our students, I don't know what the percentages might not identify going to college, and could feel the pressure of that, right? So this could be an opportunity to help bring the blood pressure down a little bit and open up some new doors that weren't otherwise there.
I think if you have a committee, first you have to have a purpose and a charge, so that you're not getting off on tangents or not really, so you're directly focused on what you're doing, so you can accomplish something. But most every committee that we have either has a purpose or a charge to it, so that you have some direction for it. I mean, the intentions are good, but you want to make sure you're going to be a progressive committee when you do this as well. You may want to kind of, that's why when you include that, you want to include stakeholders from a variety of areas.
So I thought about that piece with the stakeholder groups. really developing partnerships with organizations and groups outside, more like career focused, giving kids opportunities. But that doesn't necessarily mean, that's why I kept it broad. Future opportunities can be opportunities in any area. I mean, this could be something that designs, helps with this, the facilities committee, as we're talking about what Baker may look like with that next phase. It may come from what opportunities and space we need from this, I don't know.
I'm thinking it could include lobbying for BOCES funding for the STEAM school. Because that's an effort that really needs to be pushed now, so when that STEAM school is done, you can afford to send the students there through BOCES. Because right now, it's going to be expensive if we don't get BOCES funding for it.
Or strategic planning to get some inputs from different parts of the community, so we're not maybe overextending ourselves on surveys.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to see what would the charter look like for that committee. If we went the formal committee route, I mean, certainly a lot of this work can and should and is being done by other departments in the district. I would think, the career stuff, I would be looking at some of the guidance counselors and the teachers, putting some of that stuff together. Does it need a formal committee to? And again, I realize the name was made broad because there's a lot of aspects of this, but what is the real charter of the group if we were to make it a formal committee? And then how do you, when there are other people in the district already working some of these topics, there's always room for additional, but how do you balance that? Are they automatically a part of this committee so that the people charged with doing some of that are involved in this committee, or so I'm just trying to see how this comes together. I mean, they're all great ideas, they're all great topics that need to be enhanced. Just what's the right way to implement them in the district when there's people that at least should be doing some of this stuff full time, figuring out how to.
I think you can make the argument for, if I'm going to use the example, it is probably a bad example, but I mean, we had several presentations tonight on inclusion and talking about how to improve, especially two target schools, and the DEI committee could be the same thing because the charter of DEI is the same as the charter that's coming from the strategic plan. So it almost would be almost treated as a way to maybe be another opportunity to get some other feedback that we might not otherwise get.
Okay, are you thinking more like pairing with community resources, different employment agencies, not a full-blown, nothing against BOCES, but I'm just trying to think of a bigger picture, like a smaller intern to get your feet wet, see if you like this area, and have the collaboration between community and the school district, and have it merged together with career resources, different teachers trying to steer, or not steer kids, but let them know of all the possible opportunities. But bringing the community where it's a great resource. We have a lot of locally owned businesses that may be willing to open the doors, say, yes, this is what we do, contract. Is that what you're looking into, thinking about?
Yeah, how to make education more relevant and preparing students for opportunities that they may want or may find out that they don't want. And with me reaching out and talking to different business owners across the board, whether it's one of my neighbors is with a recruiting firm, and it was just in the high-end tech, very difficult positions, but she's now expanded into manufacturing, has expanded into finance, and she said her boss would absolutely love an opportunity to come here and have these types of discussions. How many others, I have business cards from people, in the Radisson Park area who would love an opportunity to get into schools because they desperately need to find people who are interested in their line of work and getting employees. And, why not start working on those partnerships with community businesses, right?
I'm just trying to think here, what's the board's role in this? And it sounds like something that maybe the board could charge Jason and you know, the staff to, you know, come up with ways to implement this stuff, but, you know, just trying to figure out what our role would be in that versus, you know, charging the superintendent to do this and come up with ways to do it.
We could do that, but, you know, the whole idea with, you know, boards of education is using our different areas of expertise and our connections to help foster relationships between the community and the school. And I see our role as kind of like listening and seeing where it's going to go and using our connections to bring people to the district, as well as the people within the walls, the teachers who may have connections. They may have spouses who are employed in companies who may be interested in helping our neighbors. I mean, this is a community school, public school. You know, we have people who are clearly engaged in our school district right now, and let's turn it into a positive and find positive ways to help our students.
Yeah, I'm not saying we wouldn't have any inputs here, I'm just saying the mechanism we do it. I don't know that it needs to be a board committee or anything, but, you know, trust me, I'm very interested in this area. I teach the trades up at, you know, the college level, so I'm trying to, you know, I think there's lots of opportunities out there for us to engage in as a district, but again, just trying to think of the right mechanism to do this and empowering the district and Jason to, you know, come up with some solutions here versus, you know, what's out there. And I don't know that I have the answer to that. I'm just throwing that out there for discussion.
I think that's one of the reasons why Jen's bringing it, so this can happen. The conversation can happen, and even when we leave here tonight, everybody's gonna be thinking about you, talk to different people. And I think this is something that could definitely work for us. Even Jason, when we hired Jason, one of the things that we liked about his resume was what he did in his last district about getting the community involved with hiring and everything. So I think that just the conversation is good. It's a starter, and we can see what's gonna happen going down the road.
And thank you for bringing that up, Brian, because that's actually one of the things. I actually have your CTE plan from your former district on my dining room table, and I thumb through it every so often, and that is one of the reasons why, one of the things that stood out with Jason was he looked for funding. He felt that CTE was very important in his district, and he didn't get the funding for that, but just his perseverance in going a different route, he made that happen for his students. And also, do you end up doing the one with the Mirabito Fuel Group partnership with the driving? I can't remember, you're working on that. So Jason has thought out of the box before, he's been down this road before, and it'd be nice to kind of start something like that here, but it has to start somewhere.
Yeah, the partnership with Mirabito was the drivers, the CDL, excuse me. What had happened is that we spoke with some senators, and it's the age of the CDL, because they're looking to get more drivers, short-term fuel delivery personnel. Currently we have interstate lines being crossed where we have different state requirements for CDLs, yet, you know, it's really a New York State issue. And I'll leave it at that. I won't get into politics this evening.
Maybe an appropriate way forward is to ask you to go away and think about this and come back with a recommendation at the next board meeting. See what you think, if this should be a board committee or if you got it, and take it from there.
You know, even if it wasn't just a board committee, but I think I'd like to see us partnering with some of the local colleges maybe a little bit more than we have been.
Which was the plan that you had the college courses intertwined into the programs that you developed. The different areas were different than some of the things I've seen here.
I know we have a lot of partnerships currently. Renee and Tony have done a wonderful job establishing that. It's been a heck of a year, as everybody knows, and we really haven't had enough time to really dive in deep. So that's certainly going to be one of my missions moving forward. And Renee and I have had several conversations about looking at how we can improve and looking for coursework that the students want. So those conversations have begun. Again, we just have not had enough time, and that's not an excuse to really dive deep to see what we have, where we can improve. And to that point, Joe has done a great job as well. I don't want to leave Joe out because he's a big part of the curriculum as well.
So between now, I think you have an extra week in there because of the Juneteenth holiday. So you have an extra week to think about this, and then we can talk about the next board meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
And then the last thing on roundtable is the board goals, which Joe went ahead and did the draft. We haven't looked at these in a while, and as Superintendent Townsend said, it's been one heck of a year. So what Joe did was he took our goals from last year, 2021, to this school year, but will be established last year for this school year, and deleted the ones we've already hit and left with ones that we haven't hit yet from this year. So I'm not sure if anyone's had a chance to look at that. The Board of Education, goal number 1, will review and adopt a new comprehensive 5-year strategic plan. We also last year had the shared decision-making plan, but we achieved that already and approved that. And we approved an extension for this year so we can begin working on that strategic plan. So are we all set with keeping that as our prime number 1 goal?
I think it's, yeah, I both side by side. I think this draft is really probably where we just ought to go, because we still have to see where our kids are. We have to see where our learning loss is. We might have a normal year next year where we can have some good data so we can see where we are. And I think our focus has to be to get the kids where they need to be more than anything right now. And I'm going to add another one in here. The safety still might be an issue, and Armored One still has a closer with BOCES. So even if it's just security check, minor things, whatever. I think this is a good document, and see where we are next May. I won't be here, but see where we are next May.
John, you'll be on several committees. And to your safety point, we're going to be discussing that specific issue in executive session.
So for goal number 2, you know, I'm looking at the first bullet point with the measure. I don't even know, you know, where we are. This school district doesn't know where we are. And are we comfortable with leaving that as is? It seems like some of our goals when it comes to student achievement have been more aspirational, they've been difficult to pinpoint, like realistic.
Well, as they said, I think in the report tonight, they mentioned at 80% tonight, and it said we would be doing great if we got it 80%. So, yeah, we still have a long ways to go.
It also says, similar to last year, new baseline benchmarks for academic attendance and social emotional student data will be established. So, you know, that can be done based on the data that we've already collected this year that's been reported out, and we'll have more information, obviously, you know, come summer.
Summer.
So it just buys you, again, a little bit more time.
So we're fine with leaving number 2 as is. So number 3, we have a policy we still need to create, and I did pull up, after looking at this weekend, I did pull up a sample from NYSBA. Joe, do we know if Erie 1 has a sample policy for diversity, equity, inclusion? I pulled one up from NYSBA from a workshop I went to, but it's different than how Erie 1 presents theirs.
This one, I'm sure, and it's definitely probably better.
And I can double check, and we can, you know, bring that to the policy committee when we next meet.
So that would be the second policy. We need to bring forward the wellness one as well in September or October, whenever that first meeting is. And then as for equity audits, I'm not sure if we've seen, if there was.
I don't recall seeing an equity audit, but I think that something is probably going to be done. Or should be.
We've completed a few, but we have continued to work. Given the pandemic, obviously it put some delays in information, but we did share, you know, 2 years ago now, I think in a weekly letter, data related to acceleration. But we've been working as groups to try to pull this information for discipline and at some point, I mean, given the fact that there's a narrowing down and of the data that Danielle's put together in the dashboard, it might be something that is easily accessible at some point in time.
I was going to ask if we could just, because I haven't seen an example of it, can you put an example of it in either the Friday letter, or can we see it next time around? I'm not familiar with what's in it, so I'm not.
Well, neither are we.
Yeah, okay, well, good. Then we're all in the shallow end of the knowledge pool here. Perfect.
And goal number 4 has to do with the capital project, and I think we're well on our way with that, and we'll keep that the same as you guys go through the plans for each phase of the facility committee.
I just have one comment there. I
Sure.
think this is a school year plan, right? July 1st through June 30th, so there's no way to measure whether we met that if it's got December 23. So I know the intent is to give us longer in case we don't get it on the vote in May, but I think we don't want to go past June 30th for something we're going to measure in the 22-23 school years. I think our intent is to vote on it in May of 2023, so do we want to, I would say we put it into the 2023 school year.
And that was actually, I mean, remember this was drafted on May 9th?
Yeah.
In the policy, or the facilities meeting, which our
Right,
last
changed
presentation
it.
of the board,
Yeah.
it was changed to May of 2023.
So it's an easy fix, just a
Yep.
point.
We can put it under objectives and then have the measure be holding a vote.
Yeah. Or just change December to May.
Yeah.
That's what I did on the draft right now.
Well, it'd be prior to June, I guess, or just remove the word prior. You know what we're going.
And then the last one, are we all done with 4? The last one was developing the goals for the 23-24 school year by June 30th of next year, just as we're doing this year for next school year.
Really isn't a goal, though, is it? Is it more of a procedural thing? Should we?
Well, since I've been on my first year on the board, we actually didn't set our goals until October of the school year that we were in.
Wouldn't we want?
And then September, we keep getting better, we keep pulling it back.
Yeah, but we're getting better as a board, right? So should be, I would argue it would be procedural, and I kind of picking up on what Matt was saying earlier and what Joan was saying. I mean, do we have a goal this year to, to look at school safety more holistically, or some other combination of the items we talked about tonight to be more goal-oriented and use this as a procedural change? And I'm not stuck on it either way, just.
So you are proposing getting rid of 5 and make that just a norm, a board norm going forward, which it probably should have always been, and putting some sort of safety goal in there.
Or some goal that we collectively think is important for the district, that either reflects something we need to do as a board, or that feeds into something else, like strategic planning or Jason's contract, I don't know, something like that.
We don't have to have 5, do we? Is 5 a magic number?
We haven't always had 5.
We don't have to have 5.
3.
So, I mean, if there's not anything that's pressing, we can just drop that and leave it at 4 too.
Leave it at 4? Especially since we haven't had to develop a goal right now.
Sometimes
Something
less
new
is
like you're
more.
proposing be kind of difficult to have done by next board meeting.
And I would
So
argue.
then we could, if everyone's set with this, then we could take action on this at the last June meeting and we will set for next year.
And we could put the security topic in the 4, because that's dealing with facilities and stuff like that, which I think we have a pretty comprehensive right now, just based on what we've done for the last 6-ish years or whatever that. But we could just throw something about security in 4 and have it covered.
I think that secure that, yeah.
Review the security, something, and make sure it's.
Based on the conversations that were not on the mic, I would say that 4 makes sense if we include it in goal number 4.
So Joe, you're gonna remove 5 for us, please? And then can we put that draft in the Friday letter so we can review it before it ends up on the agenda for the next meeting? We all set? Anything else?
Maybe 5 could be a goal of a board meeting under 2 hours.
It was very good presentations tonight.
I've been trying for 3 years.
I'll carry
Hour
on.
and a half, 8:30. Okay, moving on to item 12. Resolve that the Board of Education enter into executive session to discuss collective negotiations pursuant to the Taylor Law, to discuss a CSEA contract, the employment history of a particular person or corporation, and matters which will imperil the public safety if disclosed. Can I have a motion, please?
Move.
Joan first, Frank second. All in favor? Opposed? Passes 8-0. 5 minutes and come back.
Did you say 5 minutes and we adjourn? Oh, 5 minutes. yeah.
5 minutes until
Move.
Wishful thinking.
Yeah, well.